And I will, oh, it's recording, so. And I'll also play some music. Hi everyone, we'll be starting soon. Just gonna wait a couple of minutes. I think we can start at 8:04. Okay. I'm gonna pause the music. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to UX Writing for Fun and Profit. We're going to be starting soon, and Peter will be starting his talk. So I'll be handing it over to Peter, and I hope you guys enjoy this talk and all his workshops. I know he's helped me a lot with my content writing, and I think it'll be fun. So I'll stop screen sharing, and Peter, you can start whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you. And fun fact, Divya took that picture of me because I frantically needed a headshot for a conference last year. Divya, it says host disabled screen sharing. Do you mind giving me permission?
1 second. Yeah. I'm going to make you a host.
Perfect. All right, let me get into presentation mode. Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about UX writing. I think on that intro slide, you saw we'll need a Figma file for this. So if you, for any reason, don't have a Figma account, quickly sign up for one. You'll have some time because I'm going to talk through some things. But yeah, I am Peter. I work at Autodesk, which is a company that acquired another company that I worked at, PlanGrid, which has over the years taken in a lot of co-ops from Waterloo. There are people at PlanGrid and now Autodesk, who started as Waterloo co-ops and are now like very senior engineering managers. And in the entire time I've been there, we've always had people from Waterloo around, and it's always been fantastic. Always looking forward to the terms when we'll have students around, and it's just always been a pleasure. So it's great that you all asked me to be here, and I'm happy to share some information. UX writing for fun and profit. I promise I will get to both of these things, fun and profit. But before that, let me just kind of run through what we're going to do. So what we're going to get to is workshop time. And I think maybe this group hasn't done a lot of these workshops. So I think we figured out a way where we can do this. But what I really want to do is give you concrete sort of tools you can use to write more effectively when you're doing product design work. And that's really the goal, to give you, to assume that you're not going to go into the field of content strategy or UX writing, but that you do want to build some of these skills. So I want to give you some real takeaways there. So we'll spend about half of our time on that workshop. Before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about how I see writing fitting into product design. That writing is really a type of product design, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And then what I tried to do is just kind of distill down like 3 really concrete things to know, that if you just, on a sticky note on your desk have these 3 things, they'll make you a much better writer for software. So I'll run through that, and then we'll go through the workshop, and we can talk more about strategies there. But let's jump in. So why did I end up here? Why listen to me about this stuff? Like I said, I'm a content strategist at Autodesk. Autodesk is a really big company. Works that, AutoCAD is their big product. I think Autodesk is 39 years old at this point, so very old when it comes to tech companies. I work in the construction wing of Autodesk. So we build the products that help people sort of plan and organize and put up, skyscrapers, dams, big infrastructure projects, things like that. I don't come from a construction background. I spent many years writing for basically mobile tech products. I was working in education, making educational games, helped make a mindfulness app. And that's really where I kind of learned a lot about writing for technology, because before that I was teaching at the University of Rochester, not too far from Waterloo, right over in New York. And before that, after college, I was an editor for Encyclopedia Britannica. And I kind of point out this range of things to make the point that, I guess, I've spent my career thinking a lot about writing and teaching writing, and it's happened in a lot of different contexts, but really what I've noticed is that things kind of stay the same. You're always paying attention to audience, you're always paying attention to the ways that you're communicating, and a lot of the strategies I'm going to talk about are really consistent, whether or not you're sort of writing for a mobile app or writing for a class or something like that. They can be applied in similar ways. One thing I kind of want to clarify, because I find this stuff really confusing, especially if you go look at job listings and you go look at like what's going on in what people call content in technology. The problem is that people will call anything content, so it's not particularly useful. The first big kind of divide is that if you work in marketing, you'll produce a lot of content. That's not what I'm going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about product content. So the same, writing as it applies to the product design that you're doing. But if you start talking about this with people who are hiring or job searching, like they'll have all these different assumptions about what content is. Everything from videos to like technical documentation. Chatbots are really big. Content strategy, microcopy, copywriting, all this stuff like falls into the bucket of content. It's not particularly useful in my mind to think of it that way. So it really helps to be clear when sort of talking to people or interrogating jobs, what type of stuff we're talking about. So what we're talking about today is just UX writing. So the writing that happens alongside all the other design work that you would be doing when designing for products. And if there's the point I want to make today, it's that I'd really encourage you to think about UX writing as product design. And I'll keep coming back to this and kind of explain that um, I think it'll solve a lot of problems if you just sort of think, well, how would I approach this design wise and apply that to your writing, right? So UX writing is just kind of a focused form of product design where you're thinking really particularly about the language that you're using. The more you try to like separate out the writing from the product design, I think the more problems you're going to run into overall. So let's talk about writing for user experience. I'll kind of give you a broad overview, and then we'll look at a few examples. But you know, when I say like it's just product design, it has the same goals in mind. So if you're writing for user experience, you're really thinking about, well, what does the user want to accomplish, right? What are they trying to get done? And how is it that the language can work with the visual design to make sure that the user can accomplish that goal, right? So it's just thinking, you know, it's applying the same thought process that you would in product design, but thinking about how the language that you're using applies to that. Another big part of it is that language is often one of the biggest ways we can prevent confusion or mistakes that a user could make. So a lot of times we're dealing with, you know, some concept in a product that might be confusing, or a workflow that's confusing, and we're stuck with it for some reason. And we can use language and the UX writing to mitigate the confusion for a user and help get them over those roadblocks. So if we go from, you know, the aims to like, well, how do you do this, or what would you be looking at? You know, I really think about it as just reduce confusion, increase clarity, just get out of somebody's way, give them the bare minimum so that they can get done what they want to get done. And I think this really holds true um, no matter what type of product you're working on. You know, like I said, I've done, you know, everything from mindfulness apps to this construction software, and it's really kind of very similar when we're thinking about what we want the writing to accomplish. Um, you know, I mentioned limitations. Technical constraints when you get into like the real world of product development is huge. You know, this isn't going to surprise any of you who have done a few co-ops at this point, but you know, things have to get shipped on time. Things have to get built and released and generate money, and that means that sometimes we can't find the perfect technical solution to something, and that might cause some user experience hiccup where we rely on the UX writing to mitigate that. So a lot of writing can be, you know, if you just think about the number of error messages you see, right? That's all UX writing. So how can we reduce confusion and help find the user or get them ways around limitations? And then the other thing I would say is a big part of UX writing that you kind of may or may not need to worry about depending on the type of product that you're building is localization. So the practice of taking a product that's written in English or another native language and not just translating it, but making it really work in another language. And that involves both like direct translation, but also, you know, making sure you're not being culturally specific in a way that is going to be either like weird or offensive to somebody from a different culture. Um, Localization itself is a huge field. There are many, many companies dedicated to helping you like localize your products. So, you know, you don't necessarily need to be an expert at localization, but there are things that you can pay attention to that will make whoever is doing your localization love you. So you can kind of anticipate some of those things. So I thought what I would do is just show you a couple of examples of like if we'll look at some screens and just be able to say like, well, from a UX writing perspective, what am I paying attention to, right? If a designer comes to me and says, hey, I have this screen, what do you think? How can we improve it? I can just show you the types of things that you can think about if you put your UX writing lenses in. So this is Craigslist. It has a mobile app. Craigslist is just kind of a marketplace. Also been around for a very long time, but this is a screen where you would, on the mobile app, where you would set the location of where you want to search. So if I'm looking for an apartment or a job or something, I can set the area. And a couple things stick out to me here. The first is that everything, with the exception of the name of the place, South Lake Tahoe, is lowercase. And this is not necessarily good or bad. You might have opinions on whether this works visually or not. I might have opinions on whether it helps readability or not, but it's just kind of something you would keep your eye on, and you wouldn't want to be switching between these things. Another big thing that stuck out to me is we have two different buttons here, but both of them are doing the same action. So the main button, the main call to action, is choose this location at the bottom of the screen. But the apply button in the top right of the screen is a little more hidden and does the same thing. It's also going to apply that location. So looking at this as a UX writer, I might be like, well, wait a minute. Why are we using two different words? Maybe there's something in user testing that led us to believe this is the right way to do it. Maybe not. Maybe it's random or just arbitrary, but it's the type of thing that we might pay attention to. We might think about why we would use the word choose instead of select or something like that. These type of things come up. One thing that stood out to me, because I was actually looking at this problem for a work thing the other day, is that it's asking you to enter a city or zip/postal code. So why not just say one or the other, right? And I'm totally speculating here, but my guess is this is a localization thing. In the United States, we say zip code. Other countries say postal code. I don't know what Canada does. I know the UK says postal code. But my guess is that when they were building this, they didn't want to need to call the device's country location in order to change what word is in this field. So this is an instance where, as a UX writer, I would say, well, let's just pick one of these and figure out what the best one is. But there's a technical limitation that allows us to not do that. And then finally, I would look at this word choice. Radius stuck out to me as, it's a sciencey word. It's definitely the most accurate way to describe what's going on here. But could there be other words that would just be as clear? We might, think of range or something like that. So I'm not saying that like these are all bad choices, just that these are the type of choices and things you would look at where, coming at it from a product design lens, you might be looking at the size of these things in relation to each other, how they, they fit on the page, how they work together visually. When we layer language into that, we kind of get another level of like thinking about how we're communicating to a user. This is the second example I'll give you. This is from my credit card app. I think this is a really, the last screen I think was fine. This screen I think is really bad. So clear user data. What's happening, this is a sign-in screen where it saves my username and then I have to enter my password. And so it's saying clear user data. This action will forget all user data associated with this device. Do you wish to continue? So basically what it's saying is if I confirm this action, it's going to not remember my username or any other credentials that I've saved. Well, so if my credit card company called me and was like, hey, what can we do here? I'd point out a couple things. One is that the header, the verb that leads the header does not match your confirmation button. So I hit people over the head at work with this, but I really like to mirror that same language to draw that parallel and really make it clear to a user what action they're going to do when they tap this button. A couple things stuck out to me word-wise. Forget. I don't know. It's just weird for me that this machine would be forgetting something. Like machines either remember something or forget something depending on if we tell them to do it. And it just seemed like bizarre and not to kind of work or be the most intuitive way to explain this. And then the other one, other than just the sheer length of this thing, is wish. Right? Like that seemed really fancy and colloquial and like, who knows how that would translate, but like, do you wish to continue? Why not just, do you want to continue? things like that will stick out. And I really think that this was probably just like somebody wrote it pretty fast and never went back to it. When I think you can just like really clarify a ton of this. So again, if my credit card came to me and said, hey, can you fix this? This is what I would do. I would, like I said, mirror the button copy with the leading verb of the header, but then I would also shift the message to be more useful to a user, right? Like in the original, as a user, I don't really know the implications of what's going on, right? Okay, it's going to forget the user data. Do I care? Does that matter to me? Well, we could update this message to actually, you know, we don't need to ask them if they want to continue. We can just tell them the implication. Hey, you're going to have to enter your credentials again if you do this, right? So it's shorter, it's more clear, and it actually gives the user useful information. So those are just kind of like, I don't know, the lens through which kind of at my day-to-day work, I'll look at things. And these are the type of conversations that I'll have with designers about what we want to change in order to basically help a user be more successful. Which brings us to the for-profit part. And this is something I really wanted to kind of like talk about with this group, because you're all looking for co-ops, eventually looking for jobs. And you know, it's a good opportunity to think about, you know, how somebody who kind of sits on the other side of the hiring table might kind of think about these things. So I really do think that writing will get you hired. All designers write, but not all designers value writing equally. What do I mean by that? So everybody, like, if you're doing product design, you have to write, you know, like it's just the way it is. Like you're the ones who are putting the words in the mocks. You're doing writing. But, you know, I've worked with a lot of designers, and there are some designers who think a lot about the writing and the language that goes in. And there are some who aren't as comfortable with it and more just want to sort of plug it in at the end. And I'd really advise against that. So what I would really want you to do is just pay more attention to it more consistently, and that will kind of make things easier in the long run. The reason this is important is kind of because of how design teams are made up and how work is distributed depending on the type of design team that you're in. So smaller design, you know, if you're going into a 3 or 4 person design team, you're going to have to do everything. Or, you know, if you're on a small product team, you're going to need to do a lot of the writing yourself. You're going to need to do a lot of the research yourself, right? You're not going to have that specialization. If you are in a larger organization, you know, like right now, the design team I work on is pushing 100 people. That means we have the ability to really specialize. There are, you know, 7 or 8 people like me who focus on UX writing. We, I think, have almost 20 people on the research team. We have people who do ops, who kind of support and enable the work everybody else does and really improve process, right? That specialization is awesome if you want to end up at a team like that. But it doesn't mean that you're like, oh, great, I don't have to research anymore. I don't have to write anymore. It's a little more complicated than that, where you still will need to do these things, even if it's not your specialty. And the better you are at them, the better of a partner you are to the researchers or the writers or the illustrators or whoever else you're working with, right? You're going to enable them to do better work, and you're just going to be able to work better on projects with them. Because the reality is, it's not a bunch of handoff. You're going to be sitting with the researchers and writers doing that work. So even if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to end up at a big company, I'll do the product design, the writer will do the writing. The reality of it is, it's not how it works. So, you know, the way that writing will get you hired is if you start to think about your writing just as you would think about the rest of your design, right? That it has to be part of the same process. That you do, you know, you want to play with different options. You want to iterate and you want to test, just like you would do with any of your other product design. And I would say it might seem a little strange to say, like, to go in front of a hiring team and talk about writing or research if you're trying to get a job as a product designer. But actually, if you sort of pull out some examples of where you've thought carefully about, you know, copy in your mocks or research that you've done that has informed your work, or any type of these specialties within product design, the more well-rounded of a candidate you're going to be. You don't have to be an expert in any of these auxiliary fields, but if you do some thinking about it, you're really going to stand out from the pack. So that's the sort of for-profit part, and I really do believe this. As somebody who's sat on hiring committees for designers, that people are looking for well-roundedness, not just sort of hyper specialization. So that is sort of my whole spiel on like where UX writing sits into sort of contemporary product design. I've sort of tried to distill all the stuff and thinking around writing that I have into like 3 concrete takeaways for you all. So here they are. They're not proprietary. I may have stolen things, but I really think if you pay attention to these 3 things, like, you'll solve a lot of problems. The first is that you need to get in the habit of reading like a user. And what I mean by that is that nobody actually reads anymore. We could argue about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but like, the reality is when somebody comes in and is working through a workflow in a product, or is working on software, they are not doing a linear left to right, top to bottom sort of reading and digesting. They're looking for the bare amount of information that's going to allow them to get done what they need to get done, right? So if you think about reading more as information gathering, you can kind of get into more of a mindset about what's going to make the user successful. So, in this case, less is always more. Like, fewer lines, fewer words, the more just instantly digestible information is, the more successful you're going to allow users to be. And the same goes for like simple is better. So strong, simple words are going to accomplish a lot more than like trying to cram a bunch of information in, trying to make it excessively complicated. So think less about how somebody reads and more about how they consume information. Start early. I think this is like the most important thing, and I've touched on it a few times. One of my pet peeves is if people use lorem ipsum in mocks. I really I get all worked up and I really don't like it. And the reason is because you're saying like, let's just figure out the copy later, right? Like, you ignore any problem that might come up around writing, and you like say, okay, we have this much room for the text, now just make it fit. And like, you're always going to end up with subpar writing in that case. You get locked into the design and you can't change it. They've already started building it, and then you're making all sorts of concessions with the copy. So make writing a part of your design process, right? Like, don't ever use lorem ipsum. I'm dead serious about this. Never do it. Write a terrible version of what you think is going to go in that space, and go for it, because it will make things a lot easier in the long run. And then last thing, this is sort of a trade secret about writers, but writers spend very little of their time writing. They spend the vast majority of their time revising. So what I mean by that is, the more practice someone is as a writer, the less time they spend on an initial draft. They'll just crank things out and like brain dump, get the information on the page and roughly the structure that they want, and then they spend the majority of their time shaping it. So the corollary in product design is just iteration, right? Like, revision is just iterating for writers. It's returning to something, playing with it, seeing how it can be better, and improving it with each go around. So this kind of goes along with the start early, but like, spend very little time on your first draft and spend more time as you're refining, kind of shaping it, because you're going to reap a lot more benefits that way. So try out different options. I love doing this with designers because a lot of times it's very difficult to know like a lot of times people will be like, oh, I like this one, or I don't like this one, and they can't really tell you why. That's okay. That's a skill that develops. But if you give someone 3 options, they become much more able to point out what they like about one option or the other, and it can help speed things up along the way. So try out different things, and we're going to do this with the exercises. And then get feedback on your writing, just like you would get feedback on your designs. So those, yeah, that's it. That's, you know, start early, don't use lorem ipsum, spend more time revising and think about information gathering. And if you just kind of keep that in your head as you're working through designs, I think it'll result in a lot better outcome. So that's what I have for just like general overview. I figure we can use the rest of our time to go through some strategies and exercises. And the way we're going to do this is I think the panelists are going to share out some Figma files. And if there's not too many folks here, we might be able to get everyone in one Figma file. What do you think, Divya?
Yeah, I think we can try one Figma file. I've sent it out in the chat right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody try to get into that Figma file and just raise your hand if you're having any troubles with it. And I'll kind of explain what we're going to do. So I'm going to kind of give you like really concrete things to pay attention to with a quick example. And then we're all going to go into the Figma file, copy the example that I have, and you're going to play around and do some rewriting with it. And then we'll talk about what you come up with. So, you know, if you really like something you come up with, you can raise your hand and we'll talk about it. The first thing we're going to talk about is get rid of commas mostly. Generally, one way to really improve UX writing and, like I said, get to that simple clarity is just getting rid of commas. There are a lot of different types of commas, and we won't get into like why you would use some commas or not, but it's just something you can look at and say, wait a minute, is there a way I can do this without a comma? And what we'll be looking at are these sort of introductory clause commas. So an example like this, after submitting the report, you won't be able to edit it. I am sort of on the mindset that punctuation scares people. It is what it is. But it can really, it's like a shortcut to identifying ways you can improve writing that will appear in a product. And a lot of times there's really simple ways to make this easier. You won't be able to edit the report after you submit it, right? So this is an instance where your first thought might be, hey, after you submit the report, you can't edit it. And then you go and like think about, wait, there's a comma there, and maybe I can make this better. So here's what we're gonna do. These are the examples we're working with. I've given you two examples of basically confirmation modals that you might see. So if you go into page 1 of the Figma file, see if I can switch over. Oh, you're all way ahead of me. All right, so you know what you're doing. Yeah, add your name and play around with it. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes on this. So I'll put a timer on, and then after 5 minutes, we can talk about some of what you came up with.
We're gonna get some music playing. Don't worry, guys. Just a bit of technical difficulty.
There's no technical difficulties. We just don't, you just don't want to listen to what I was listening to. All right. Okay, sorry the music wasn't, I was listening to the music, but I was also muted apparently. I never play music on these Zoom calls. How's everybody doing? I see a lot of people improving my design, which is great. I see a lot of people didn't seem to have trouble with the first modal. Does anybody want to talk about whether they found that easier or any differences they found in trying to do the first modal versus the second? And I think you need to raise your hand and one of us can unmute you. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I just missed. Was it Megan? Megan. All right. Give me 1 second, Megan. I'm going to unmute you. All right.
Hi, sorry, it wasn't me.
You're a little soft for me. Can you say that again?
I just said sorry. I don't know if you would like me to speak or not. I didn't raise my hand or anything.
Oh, you
Might be
didn't?
The other one. I think there's two of us.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Megan.
Meg, I think it's yeah.
There we go. All right.
Hi, this is Megna. Sorry.
No, that's my bad. Got your name.
Can you guys?
We could hear you, but then you cut off a little bit.
All right, maybe some technical difficulties on Magna's part. Anybody else, anything you noticed about this, or do you want to share a solution to the second modal? Any of our panelists want to jump in? Or I'm just going to make Kevin do it.
I didn't finish. Okay.
Oh yeah, you did. Here you go. You want to talk about how you solve this one?
The second one?
Shared space one, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to keep, it seemed like the designer wanted to communicate this private thing. So I wanted to keep that. And then I think I just changed the order of the sentence to just remove the comma. And then I thought about, okay, if this private thing is something that we want people to know about, maybe have some action right there to let them do it right there.
Awesome. So I know that seems like a really simple technique, like Joe, I just changed the order. Honestly, that is going to solve so many problems. If you're stuck with like a sentence and trying to make it clear, oftentimes our sentences have just really simply, we don't need to get into grammar, but they have two parts, like if this, then that, or when this, then that, or, after this, this will happen. If you just flip those around, you'll see how the grammar realigns, and you'll end up often with another way to approach it, and it can be clearer. So that can seem like a really simple thing, but just playing with it, just like you would move things around in design, can often solve it. Anybody else have a different solution? If not, we can move on to the next one, which is a bit more complicated. Let's do that. Let me get out of all these chats. All right. So the second sort of technique I want to talk about, and this is probably the last one we're going to be able to get to, but the other one's in there if you want to take a look. But this is the most important thing in writing. Like, it goes along with everything I've been saying about, revise, make it start early, make it part of your process. That the only way I really know how to convey information in writing is to think about, okay, what's everything I need to get down? And I just get it down, and I worry about how it sounds, the order of things, how long it is. I do that all later. And this is a technique that I learned a long time ago, is just write long, cut short. And it just, I've never not done it since then, right? Like, always just write longer and then shape it down, right? It's back to that, you spend more time revising than anything else. So this is an old example I have that just kind of walks through it. First, think about absolutely all of the information you need to get across to your user. Get that down on the page first, no matter how long it is. The next step is to shorten things up so that you can communicate more clearly. Well, if you took that and distilled it down once it's on the page to the core information, you can get something very short. Start by writing down everything you need to communicate to a user, then revise for clarity. And we could probably tighten that up further, but it's just an example of kind of the steps that I certainly go through if I'm thinking about any type of writing. Brain dump, get it all on the page, and then worry about crafting and shaping as you go. So in this example, I've done the first step for you. I've written this in a long and maybe not clearest way, but your job now is to kind of tighten up any part of this that you think can be better, right? So this is kind of a like mobile create your account screen where you need to enter a username and a password. There's a little terms and agreement line, and then the main call to action is continue to account. And then there's a little tooltip that tells you some information about good password hygiene. So on this one, it's page 2 of the Figma file. So if you go in and do the same thing, if I get to the right Figma file, and yeah, you're already ahead of me. So let's spend about 7 minutes on this, and then we'll talk about it, and I will get the music working properly this time. take about another minute and then we can talk about this. All right. Does anybody feel good about what they have or want to walk through any solution they have? I see a lot of different solutions here. This is great. Anybody have particular trouble with this? Oh, wait, I'm seeing some. Oh, somebody's telling me I should pick Joe. Joe?
Hi. What did I say?
That's all right. You don't have to get picked.
I made a screen and kind of reorganized information.
Let me find, I see your cursor. Is this is you?
Yeah. I think the first problem was that the information was hidden in a tooltip, and I feel like most people on mobile don't use tooltips. So I kind of put the little caption below the password to kind of create association with each other.
Cool. And you tightened up
Below
the sentence.
is where the call to actions are, and then the terms is underneath, and it's kind of smaller than all the other text on the page because I think it's less important. I'm pretty sure most people would probably not think twice and click that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, this looks a lot better, much cleaner. Can you talk about sort of what you chose to get rid of to get this much tighter password suggestion sentence?
I think I looked at the original copy, and it kind of had a lot going on. So I tried to distill it to the most, I guess, like important parts. And really what that is that it's telling you that to have a strong password, you need numbers and symbols. I guess the part where it's like you shouldn't associate things that can be, I guess, like led back to you, but I chose to leave that out.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of different ways of going about this, but I think this is a really good example of like, you know, we might have a bunch of information that we think is good to communicate, but like, what's the most necessary? Because we know that if we try to cram it all on there, they might not consume any of it, right? So if we distill it down to the most important, we can get most of the benefit without like overwhelming somebody. So that's great. Thank you. You'll have to talk to your colleagues about calling you out and making. Does anybody else want to share? All right, that's okay. I won't pick on anybody else. Here's what I think we're gonna do. I hope this was useful. I mean, I guess the main point I'm trying to make is that this, you can just kind of approach all of this in the same way you would as your design, right? All those, you know, what Joe was pointing out about all the sort of the critical approach he brought to the visuals and like where information should appear, what's buried, what's not, how it works together. Bring a lot of that same thinking to the writing itself. And I know that's going to feel a little more unfamiliar, but it's going to have a lot of the same benefits. We do have a third exercise that I want to point out just because I see it a lot, especially in error messages. And we saw it in the credit card, you know, delete your credentials example. But I see this all the time with people writing error messages. And my point is, like, just write like a human. Don't use words that you would not use in, in your normal conversation. Again, this depends on kind of the tone of your product. But we don't really have time to dive into this, but instead we can spend a little time. I'm happy to answer questions you all have. Let me know if you have any questions, because I'm happy to stick around for a little bit, or we're almost at time. So if you have to leave, that is also fine. So yeah, I'll take questions if you want. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming and listening to me. Yeah, but there's a Q&A. Thank you, Rachel. I guess I would have to open for any hand raising. All right. Last call for questions. It doesn't look like we have any. All right. Well, oh wait, I'm missing. Nope, same one. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Divya, anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to thank you for doing this workshop, and for anyone who wants to look at the slides later, we'll post them on our Slack, and you can give us some feedback in the Google form that I just sent in the chat. And thanks, Peter, again. This was really fun. And if you want to go over this example, I'd be interested, but
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, if anybody are people trying this? Does anybody have a solution? So I would say, oh man, I always feel self-conscious when I like make these examples because I'm not a designer and it looks like terrible, but I'm like, well, I don't care. Let's just focus on the writing, and then you guys make it look really good in 3 seconds. So this one, you do not have the appropriate permissions necessary to view this file. Like, I would want to think about, well, like, why is the user who can't see this trying to see it, right? Or is there a way we should try to get them to solve it? So maybe the solution is, and this will depend on what you're, you know, it's hard without any context, but like, should they be contacting an admin to get access? Is there a step they need to get access? Is it meant not to be visible? You might just want to think about like, beyond just telling them what's going wrong, allowing them to solve the problem. So could not access file. It could just be like, hey, you don't have permission to view this. Contact an admin if you think this is an error or something like that. We see that a lot of time in like SaaS web products where somebody has access to something, but they need to contact an admin. Any thoughts on this second one? I keep forgetting that people can't just chime in. We have to like say they can. Oh, I love this. Yeah. Request access from the file owner to see this file. That's great. All right, I will just say I would never use the word kindly. Verify. It's like, you know, hey, check your email and try again. Like, there's some block I feel like with a lot of people where they feel like an error message needs to be very formal and like, I don't know. But oftentimes you just need to tell somebody, hey, something went wrong, try it again. Like, oh, you might have entered something wrong. So the one thing to look out with this is it is frustrating to tell someone to do something again if the same thing is likely to occur. So that's something to watch out for. Don't give somebody a try again message if it's a back end issue with your stuff and it's never going to work. Like, in that case, like you want like a contact support or something like that. But, you know, just be on the lookout, you know, for appropriate permissions necessary. Like, would you ever say that string of words to anyone? Like, you probably would not, you know. I don't know about you. I don't say kindly, but for some reason in error messages, this type of thing, I see it all the time. And so if you just think about, well, how would I just say this to somebody if they were in front of me? You can nail a much more clear message. Do it again. You know, like I see this type of thing a lot now, not necessarily I'll do it again, but like depending on the tone of a product, you'll see this type of thing a lot. So, you know, you might end up working on products that have a certain voice where you do want to kind of rib a user or like joke around with them a little bit. So you might end up in a situation where you have to pay attention to that stuff in your writing. All right. Well, I'll leave these files up so you can play with them. And it sounds like I'll get you the slides, and the panelists can share that with everyone.
Sounds good. I actually do have a question if you have some time. How do you sort of balance a company's tone versus, or like their branding language versus writing clear and concise copy? Because sometimes they might want to be a bit more, like include some humor or I don't know, something like that to their users, but that can also sort of add a little bit of like complications or like extra things to read when you're writing.
That's a great question. You know, at where I work, you know, we're making construction software, so we always are like, we need to be clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is reading this on an iPad on a construction site, right? Like, we're not joking around. Like, it needs to be clear and concise. But there are many products, especially if you want to work in mobile, that have a little bit more character like that. The one thing you really want to watch out for there is if you are translating, that you can run into trouble very quickly. So you need to kind of think about any idioms that you're using or anything like that. My advice on that is, first, you really need to understand the voice that you're writing for, which is kind of a special skill, but like looking at a lot of the stuff that's in the product and kind of trying to take in what that tone is, how it's supposed to make you feel. And then what I would do is kind of similar to the write long, cut short, but basically think about first, what do I need to communicate? It's two goals. The user needs to do something, and then you need to make it fit the tone. So I would start with like the simple, like, what are we trying to communicate here? And then play with your options, right? Then take that original and say, well, how can I make it more funny or more irreverent or more like, I don't know, sharp and biting, like whatever the tone is, then you can kind of take it and shape it in that direction. So it's kind of the same process, like get the bare minimum down and then see and push it in different directions. And for stuff like voice, you know, we're all in our own heads. So you really getting other people on board and evaluating things is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, I'm gonna turn you on.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the presentation. I find it really interesting. And especially I'm taking a scientific writing course right now, and something I'm having trouble with in that is this difference between like writing what is grammatically correct versus writing in the sort of like the lingo of today. And I was just wondering your opinion on, you know, when should you be, or if you should be using what's like grammatically correct versus more what people talk like.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I would take everything I have to say about a science writing course with a few grains of sand, because, or salt, that's what it is. that I used to teach argumentative writing that was basically humanities based. So different than scientific writing, but also you would run into this problem where you don't want to write like you're emailing a friend or texting a friend or something like that. You know, it's always context dependent, right? It's audience dependent, right? What are the expectations of your readers? And given the context that you're in, what are the norms of communication? So, you know, in all these fields, there are just norms that you follow. So I think for something, you know, in a science writing course, kind of the same thing applies. You know, you need to be more grammatically correct. You need to kind of write, and there's stuff beyond grammar, like, you know, I think in science writing, there's a lot more passive construction. This has probably changed since since I last looked at this, but you tend to take the subject out of what's going on in the writing a little bit more. But this is also something where you can play with it. You know, if you want to write like you would email somebody to get your ideas down, and then use revision to kind of push things more towards what the expectations of the course are or the expectations of the discourse. I think that's an effective way to do it because you can only focus on so many things at once, right? Like, and the more of a beginner you are in any field, like the fewer things you can focus on at once, right? If you're learning to play a guitar, it's very hard to focus on your left hand and your right hand and rhythm all at once. You need to break it down and focus on each of those parts. But if you're very good at it, you just do it all together. Well, writing can be the same way, where maybe somebody can organize their ideas and think about audience and think about the right sort of tone to pull it all together, and they can do it all at once. Well, that's not something you should expect of yourself if you haven't been writing for a really long time. So maybe you just need to isolate, like, hey, like, what do I need to argue here? And now what are the expectations about how my sentences are formed and how I'm conveying information, and treat them as separate things. So yeah, again, can't really speak to science writing in particular, but I think, you know, when I was saying, hey, I've worked in all these different sort of adjacent fields, that kind of thing is always true, that you can break it down and address different parts.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that was a lot of good stuff to keep in mind. A lot of our like 50% of our grade is based on like 100-word praises. So yeah, it's a lot of like trying to narrow things down. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any more questions? All right, I think we're ready to wrap things up. Thanks again, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Come work at Autodesk. I'm sure we'll co-ops at some point.
And thanks everyone for coming, and I hope you guys learned a lot. Thanks, Rachel.